So touching on that, where you mentioned if he's not collecting rents for 3 or 4 months because there's no tenant in there and he still has to pay that mortgage. What is your opinion on single family rental real estate versus multifamily units?
Well, I have experience in both. And by the grace, and I say by the grace because I have two single family units. But ever since I bought those units, the same tenants have lived there. That for the entire time is still there. Great tenants, very great tenants. But I see the danger in buying and renting out single family homes. On top of the dynamic that we just spoke about previously about somebody renting a single family home. If I buy a single family home, and then of course, if you don't know, you got to put down 25% as an investor on the house. So it gives you a bigger gap of your monthly payments to what the rent can be. But the dynamic that I see, or the danger that I see or foresee, is for single family properties, once that tenant moves out, if let's say I'm getting the cash flow in, everything's good while the tenant's in there, and I'm not saving that cash flow for a rainy day, when that tenant moves out, then I'm on the hook for that mortgage until I find another tenant. Hopefully it only take a couple of days, but sometimes it can take 2-3 months depending on how it all works out. Sometimes I've heard people that say it takes many months to rent it out. And then, of course, in this dynamic of how high the rental rates are today, right, in Florida, especially in the area where I stay at, it's probably will take longer to find a tenant to rent out that property to. And then that's the headache that I see a lot of people running into. A lot of people run into that dynamic. But when it comes to which one do I prefer, single family homes or multifamily, I prefer multifamily homes 100 out of 100 times. And then the reason is because, and a duplex. In my duplex, I've had tenants move out of one side of the duplex. But if I had a mortgage on that duplex, the other tenant could still cover that mortgage while it takes me time to rehab the unit to get it ready for the next tenant to move in. But if I only had a single family, I would have to rehab the unit to get it ready and then pay the mortgage on top of that. So it's money on top of money on top of money coming out of my pocket if I don't have it to cover the cost until I get a tenant to move in. So multifamily works better, especially the more units, the better it is. If you got a quadplex, something I have also, quadplex or something like that, 2 or 3 tenants could move out, and then that one tenant could still cover the mortgage if I had a mortgage on those properties. And that's how it works in the dynamic of multifamily versus single family. Which one is better? Multifamily is always better, and this is something Grant Cardone preaches on. Of course, people get mad because he gets exuberant with it, 32 units, 65 units. But I'm of the belief that 2 units is better than 1 unit 100 out of 100% of the time. And that's why I went into the model of people that's younger age. I believe if they want to get into the real estate game, and it's a financial hack also, is buy a duplex, you live in one side, rent out the other side. Once you get that mortgage paid down, maybe refi for what you owe on it or something like that, and then rent and repeat and go buy another one. You go move into that duplex, you rent out the side that you was living in, and then you rent and repeat. You live on one side, have a tenant. So now you have 4 units, but you're not sitting there as an investor like me. The minimum that I can put down on a property is 25%. 25% each time. So just think, a $200,000 unit, adding in fees, that's $60,000, $70,000 per watt just putting down if I wanted to get a rental property because I already own a house that I'm not moving in. But somebody that's moving into a property, they can put down 3%, 5%, and then keep renting, repeating that. Keep moving along with it. But if they decide to say, hey, I'm staying in this duplex and I'm gonna go buy another duplex, then you gotta pay the 25% down. But it's still, if a tenant moves out, you still have the overhead of the other tenant still covering the mortgage, covering the repair costs and things like that. That's why multifamily investing is my preferred method, and it leaves a lot of headaches out of it.
So for the comparison of single-family units or single-family homes and multifamily properties, which one, from your experience, costs more, and say which one brings in more rent? In most cases.
All right, the cost for multifamily will. Well, I would say a cost of a multifamily is higher than a single family, but that's not always the case. That's not always the case, because understand a single family house is usually based on, if you're buying a single family house to rent it out, it's based on the comps in the area as if you're living in the property. So what I mean by that, so let's just say your neighborhood. If I wanted to come in here and buy a rental property, single family, I got to pay what people are paying to live in the neighborhood. So $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 for a house, and then I'll get rent's probably like $1,500, $1,800 a month, and that's not really dynamic. When they start getting to multifamily properties, you're buying the property based on the revenue, because that's the only reason why you're buying a rental property, especially when you get to multifamilies, is you're buying the revenue that it generates. So you're just paying a multiple on the revenue. So case in point, I'll give you an example, real life example that I had. So I believe I was in the Netherlands at the time. I was on Zillow and I seen his property. The guy had it on, he had it for sale, duplex, great area. He had it on sale for, I think, 270 or some odd dollars. And then, so I still like the property, and they was basing it on the comps in the area of people living in it. And then so I reached out to the realtor. The realtor was telling me the same thing, and based on the comps in the areas of how much, the properties are going in the areas. But what I did was I asked the realtor for the rent rolls and things like that, and I ran the matrix of the revenue that was being generated from the property. And then I told the realtor, because he had one tenant, it was a duplex, so he had one tenant paying close to market rate, and then he had another tenant that was paying way below market rate. And then so I added the numbers together, did the matrix on it, and then I said, based on the numbers, this property is worth $215,000, $216,000. Of course, they had a conniption fit and all that. And then so what I said was, hey, why don't we do this? We will call a property appraiser. You pick them, I'll pay for it. We call a property appraiser, and then whatever the property appraisers say, then that's what we'll go on. So they agreed to that. Property appraiser comes, and he said, he said two things. Based on this property, if you was living in it, and that's not the jargon used, but just a living in property where the family's going to live in, this property is worth $260,000. Then he had another model based on revenue off the rents that were received. This property is worth $216,000. So, of course, the appraiser presented this to the seller, and the seller said, well, I can't poke the bear, and I can't argue with an expert. And he figured the property appraiser was the expert on it. And he said, okay, I'll sell it for $216,000. And then I bought the property for $216,000. And then, of course, on top of that, did repairs, raised the rents. And actually, that tenant that was paying way below market rent, she was probably in there for about 2 or 3 more months, because we was raising rent and her lease was coming up. So we raised the rent, and then we just put her on a month-to-month lease. So, make it equitable for her to move out when she was ready. And then now both properties are at market rates. And now that same property that I got for $216 is worth about $450,000.